Welcome to the Atlantic Perspectives podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to the White House in Europe with Maxime Lobé. In the previous episode, we left the US under the presidencies of Taylor, Fillmore, Pierce and Buchanan. For 12 years, these four presidents tried to preserve the Union as the country moved deeper into crisis. The debate over slavery divided the nation. Political compromises failed. The party system changed. And while European powers watched this young republic with great interest, the United States seemed to be moving steadily toward war. In November 1860, a new president is elected. His name, Abraham Lincoln. A few weeks later, several southern states announced their secession. When Lincoln takes the oath of office in March 1861, the United States is already divided. To many Europeans, the American experiment seems close to collapse. But over the next 4 years, Lincoln does more than fight to save the Union. He must also prevent Europe's great powers from recognizing the Confederacy. March 1861, Washington, D.C. Abraham Lincoln takes the oath of office as the 16th President of the U.S. Born in Illinois and trained as a lawyer, he becomes the first president elected from the young Republican Party. His election immediately triggers a major political crisis. Before he even arrives at the White House, 7 slave states leave the Union and create the Confederate States of America. Lincoln refuses to recognize their independence. For him, the Union is permanent. No state has the right to leave the United States on its own. A few weeks later, in April 1861, Confederate forces attack Fort Sumter, a federal fort in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. The Civil War begins. At first, Lincoln focuses on one clear objective: saving the Union. Ending slavery is not yet his official goal. His first priority is to prevent the US from breaking apart. But Lincoln quickly realizes that this war will not be decided only on American battlefields. It will also be decided in London and in Paris. In 1861, Great Britain is the world's leading economic power. Its textile mills depend heavily on cotton grown in the southern states. Napoleon III's France also has important economic interests linked to the Confederacy. Southern leaders, therefore, hope to gain diplomatic recognition from Europe's major powers. Such a decision could completely change the course of the war. It would give the Confederacy international legitimacy and could open the door to economic or even military support. Lincoln immediately understands the danger. He gives his Secretary of State, William Seward, one essential mission: prevent any European recognition of the Confederacy. This diplomatic battle becomes almost as important as the war itself. But at the end of 1861, one incident nearly starts another war. An American warship stops the British mail ship Trent and arrests 2 Confederate diplomats on their way to Europe. The reaction in London is immediate. The British government begins preparing a military response. For several weeks, the US risks fighting Great Britain while already fighting the Confederacy. Lincoln refuses to let the crisis escalate. The 2 Confederate diplomats are eventually released. The crisis comes to an end. This decision probably prevents a disastrous conflict. A war against the world's greatest naval power would have seriously weakened the Union. But the European question does not disappear. By 1862, the war has reached a stalemate. The number of casualties keeps rising. In several European capitals, political leaders begin discussing the possibility of mediating between the North and the South. Napoleon III is especially interested in this idea. A negotiated peace could eventually lead to the permanent independence of the Confederacy. Lincoln realizes that he must change the very nature of the war. In September 1862, after the Battle of Antietam, he announces the upcoming Emancipation Proclamation. Beginning on January 1, 1863, all enslaved people living in territories still in rebellion will be declared free. This decision has enormous moral and political significance. But it is also a major diplomatic success. From this point on, the war is no longer fought only to preserve the Union. It also becomes a war against slavery. For the British government, which abolished slavery throughout most of the British Empire 30 years earlier, officially recognizing the Confederacy becomes much more difficult. British public opinion, already strongly opposed to slavery, increasingly supports the Union. In France, Napoleon III also realizes that recognizing the Confederacy without British support would be extremely risky. Little by little, the South's diplomatic hopes disappear. The Confederacy remains isolated. The Union has won a decisive diplomatic victory. Meanwhile, the war continues. In July 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg becomes a major turning point. General Robert Lee's Confederate Army is forced to retreat. A few months later, Lincoln delivers his famous Gettysburg Address. In just a few minutes, he reminds Americans that their nation is founded on the principle that all people are created equal, and that this war will determine whether such a nation can long endure. In 1864, despite widespread exhaustion and enormous human losses, Lincoln is re-elected. A few months later, Union armies achieve victory. In April 1865, General Robert Lee surrenders at Appomattox Courthouse. The war is over. The Union has been saved. But Lincoln knows that military victory alone is not enough. The Emancipation Proclamation is a wartime measure. To end slavery permanently, the Constitution itself must be changed. In January 1865, after months of political debate, Congress approved the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. It abolishes slavery throughout the United States. However, the victory is short-lived. Lincoln lives long enough to see Congress pass the amendment, but on April 14, 1865, Abraham Lincoln is assassinated at Ford's Theater by John Wilkes Booth. He dies the following morning. The United States loses the president who has just led the nation through the greatest crisis in its history. Abraham Lincoln is often remembered as the president who saved the Union and ended slavery. But his legacy is also deeply international. Throughout the Civil War, he understands that the future of the United States depends as much on diplomacy as it does on military victories. By preventing Great Britain and France from recognizing the Confederacy, his administration denies the South the international support it desperately needs. When the war ends in 1865, the US has been profoundly transformed. Slavery is abolished. The federal government emerges stronger than ever before. And Europe's great powers realize that a reunited United States is destined to play an increasingly important role in world affairs. With Abraham Lincoln, we also reach the end of Season 2 of The White House and Europe. Since John Quincy Adams, we have followed a young republic searching for its place alongside the European powers. We have seen it affirm the Monroe Doctrine, expand across the continent to the Pacific Ocean, strengthen its democracy, and finally endure the greatest crisis in its history. The US has survived, but the nation that emerges from the Civil War is no longer the country George Washington once knew. A new chapter in American history is about to begin, one that will gradually lead the US to become one of the world's leading powers. This was The White House in Europe with Maxime Lebet. Thank you for following this second season. Don't forget to subscribe and share the podcast. You can find Atlantic Perspectives on social media and at atlanticperspectives.org. Music licensed via Epidemic Sound.